even though you had Michael Payton on, and he's clearly studied some of what William Lane Craig does, to include his dabbling in the so-called philosophy of time. Anyway, in 2009, William Lane Craig was in a debate with a biologist named Lewis Wolpert. And after the debate, when they were transitioning from the actual debate portion to the Q&A, the moderator asked William Lane Craig, point blank, had Lewis Wolpert completely annihilated all of your arguments, would that change anything in your position? And Craig, in his most honest, said, absolutely not, because my faith is not contingent on my arguments. So by anyone...
I think there was there's somebody, and I can't remember who it is, that Dawkins describes, and he said, if every single piece of evidence were given to me, that was it. If everything in the Bible that was proved to be untrue was removed...
That's Kurt Wise.
Sorry?
Yeah, Kurt Wise.
That's Kurt Wise.
Oh, right.
Geologist.
Yeah. Sorry, Owen, I think you wanted to come back.
No, I was just throwing in what they did. It's Kurt Wise.
Yeah, he is a geologist who studied under William J. Gould, Stephen J. Gould.
What's your take on it, Integral, then? Do you think... do you think that he therefore knows that he's wrong and knows that he's being dishonest? Or is he just so utterly committed that you couldn't really call it dishonesty?
No, I think he's absolutely aware exactly how slimy and sabotaneous he is. And he's mildly proud of it.
Psychopathically, manipulative about it all, yeah?
Yeah, well, there's no way that... I mean, maybe when he's in the moment and talking, because debates do kind of come a little bit fast at times. So maybe in the moment, you could say in one debate, he got carried away with the moment. But he's been presenting the same 5 arguments since 1979. It's the same 5 arguments in every debate he has.
What are the? I know he's got the Kalam argument. What are the other 4 in short form?
He's got the Kalam cosmological argument, which I know you have issues with, and he knows that it's a defective argument as well, which is why he needs to come up with the contingent cosmological argument to help justify the first premise of the Kalam. And also he throws in the bit about the resurrection because that helps shore it up somehow. And then his complete non-argument, which is one's personal experience with God. If you have a religious experience and you have no reason to think that you're delusional, say, then you are entitled to declare that as evidence for the existence of God, not just internally, but testimonially to other people. So he generalizes.
I felt fear in a thunderstorm, therefore Thor exists.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Back to Kalam, though. My issue with Kalam, just so you understand it, is that even if I concede every premise and the conclusion of Kalam, and I've seen Craig have to go through the then tortuous process, that conclusion does not provide evidence of a God. He then has to add on to that it's got to be a God.
Right.
It's got to be a personal God.
He's got to do 2 things.
And that is where I completely fall out with him. And it really, as I say, it's a tortuous argument. Sorry, do go on.
Just to get to the cause, well, he sets up the Kalam cosmological argument, which he didn't come up with. He revived it. It was, when he brought it out of retirement, it was something like 800 years retired.
Let's be real. The Kalam is just a first cause argument. And, the bottom line is we have no data on that. It's an unknown. The Kalam cosmological argument is basically a God of the gaps argument.
But it is unknown because it's the assumed conclusion. It's like the guy that Enyart told me on Thursday night on his radio show, where when he said that his evidence of creation over biological evolution was the first and second laws of thermodynamics relating to the Big Bang, and how I had to believe in the Big Bang. And if we don't have an explanation within nature, then the explanation has to be supernatural, and the only supernatural thing that one can assume is his particular interpretation of the Christian God.
And the funny thing is, we had Hamza Tutsi on the show using Kalam to argue for the existence of Allah. They can't be right.
The beauty of the Kalam cosmological argument is it has all the smackings of saying something, but all it says is everything that exists doesn't not exist. That's as far as you get with Kalam. And the whole first premise that everything that begins to exist has a cause, there's no distinguishing feature between begins to exist and exists.
Well, I mean, it's
Again?
it's inductive reasoning at that. You know, and inductive reasoning, you know, has its place, and it sort of works fairly well in day-to-day life. But extrapolating it back to the beginning of the universe, which as far as we know was a fairly unique event, inductive reasoning will fail there. Just like quantum mechanics, inductive reasoning will fail once you get down to the quantum level or up to relativistic speeds.
Yeah,
I think most scientists look at it.
Please, if I may, very quickly, I just wanted to pick up on the last thing you just said there, Integral. I may be misquoting it, I may have misheard you. Did you say that there's no distinction between something beginning to exist and existing? I'm not sure what you're saying.
Oh, right. If you look at anything and you say anything you can pick in the universe to possibly include the universe itself and say, this X thing began to exist here. Well, that's just a particular arrangement of particular objects in the universe. And there's no reason to suppose that there existed a point in time where there was literally no thing that could exist. I see no sense in saying that, such that in one moment there was nothing, and then in the next moment there were suddenly things that existed which...
Yeah, I follow. Concordance.
I always wonder if these philosophers really think that these deductive exercises are going to impress people not impressed by these types of arguments. The ontological argument, which always struck me as, even if you...
Can you jog our memories? Because
if you can think of a being for whom there is no greater, no greater being, and then if reality makes that thing better, then therefore, because you can conceive it, it must actually exist. Which, as I understand it in modal logic, these things all make perfectly consistent arguments. You can challenge the preconceptions about them, and it's possible to debate them, but somehow they're sound logic. I don't think that the mysteries of the universe can be got at by these types of modal logic without some sort of an input of observation. And I know the philosophers are going to kill me on this, but I am so unimpressed by arguments that come from these first principles based on common experience.
They won't hate you. Some of them will. But this is what makes me giggle when some of these people use philosophy to argue into existence of God. I mean, you will get eminent professors of philosophy, such as Barbara Forrest, who actually was asked that specific question on the charity event this year. She quoted Hume to argue that nothing can be argued into existence unless there is evidence. Look at A.C. Grayling. Look at Daniel Dennett. None of these eminent philosophers would ever try and use philosophy to argue into existence of God. So I don't think I think you're being harsh on yourself.
I always think back to Carl Sagan's perspective. Carl Sagan and the Dragon in My Garage, no matter how clever your argument is, no matter how many refutations of dependency on evidence is, no matter how great many knockdowns you have for empiricism, unless you've got some sort of empirical basis for believing something. And when I hear something like, we know that time is not infinite, it's not possible for it to be infinite, I always think to myself, you're talking about an N of one. You're talking about a single instance of something and trying to generalize an inductive conclusion. As Thunder was saying, as a scientist, I know that's never going to be accurate. And if someone finally does discover some fundamental truth about existence, I don't think they're going to do it by these inductive tricks. They're not going to do it by some clever twist of modal logic. It's going to have to come from some interesting new observation that can only be explained by something we didn't think of before.
Absolutely.
I'll just add the... And then I'll go. He mentions the contingent cosmological argument, which is the one where he says the existence of the universe is either explained by chance, physical necessity, or a human being. And then the second premise of that is it's not explained by chance or physical necessity, therefore Jesus rose from the dead or whatever. And with respect to the modal logical argument, the trick of modal logic is the difference between the difference among strictly logically possible, narrowly logically possible, and broadly logically possible. And the equivocation comes in when Craig says things like, well, it might not be strictly logically possible, but it is broadly logically possible. And if it is the case that in modal logic, if something is potentially a necessary being, it is definitely a necessary being. So if it potentially could exist in that way, it must exist. And that's the sham. And as far as the infinity thing goes, Craig's argument about infinity not having a sequence of previous events that are infinite carries no water, because he postulates a future that has precisely that many number of events. So for the exact same reasons that that he claims you can't traverse the time from the beginning of time, because the sequence of events isn't infinite, so we don't wind up where we are now in time, is the precise same reason.
I have to say, I've never understood the infinite regression argument. Do you want to summarize that for us in a nutshell?
Oh, it's essentially that if the sequence of past events is infinite, then there's not enough, I hate to use the word time, but there's not a better word for it. There's not enough time for us to get where we are in time, which is stupid.
Yeah. If you have it's like Zeno's paradox, that you can never fire an arrow and hit the target because it always has to travel one half the distance from where it's at to the next point. And since you can't have an infinite series of distances, since there must be a quanta of distance, therefore it's impossible to shoot an arrow and hit a target. You can prove that with that same type of basis of argument, right?
Yes, but the thing is, well, I don't think people feel that confident if the arrow was aimed at their head. Sorry.
Well, I, being a good little mathematician, I say we go out and get some empirical evidence, and I know where William Lane Craig's going to be in a couple weeks, and there's even a spare chair.